Thank you very much. I want to start by thanking Kate and Meredith for their leadership, for their friendship, and for inviting the ACLU to be a founding partner in the AI Now initiative. We are so excited to be your fellow travelers in every sense of the word on this journey. It seems to me this is an auspicious time for us to get together and to ask these questions for two reasons at least. First is, as many of the speakers have said today, there's still time to do something about the provocations and the questions that are being raised today. It isn't too late for us to have an impact on the legal and policy and technology debates that are taking place. And the second reason is Donald Trump. The democratic stress test of Donald Trump's presidency has gotten our attention. It's much harder to believe, as Eric Schmidt once told us, that technology holds the answers to all of the world's problems. And many technologists who were once fond of saying that they had no interest in politics have come to realize, I think, that politics is very interested in them. By contrast, consider how over the last 2 decades, the internet came to become the engine of a surveillance economy. Silicon Valley's apostles of innovation managed to exempt the internet economy from basic consumer protection rules that govern most industrialized democracies by arguing that it was too early for regulations. They would stifle innovation. In almost the same breath, they told us that it was also too late for regulations because they would break the internet. And by the time significant numbers of us came to recognize that maybe we hadn't gotten such a good deal, the dominant business model had become so entrenched that to change it will now require a Herculean political effort. So when we place innovation within or atop a normative hierarchy, we end up with a world that reflects private interests rather than public values. So if we shouldn't just trust the technologists, trust innovation, trust the corporations and the governments that employ most of the technologists, what should be our North Star in this conversation? As a civil libertarian, I would offer that liberty, equality, and fairness are the defining values of a constitutional democracy, and each of those values can be threatened by advances in automation that are unconstrained by strong legal protections. Liberty will be threatened when the architecture of surveillance that we've already constructed is trained or trains itself to track us comprehensively and to draw conclusions based on our public behavior patterns. Equality is threatened, as you've heard tonight, when automated decision-making mirrors biases that already exist in our society, at replicating them under the cloak of technological impartiality. And basic fairness, what we lawyers call due process, is threatened when enormously consequential decisions that affect our lives, whether we'll be released from prison, offered a home loan, offered a job, are generated by proprietary systems that don't allow us to scrutinize their inputs or methodologies and meaningfully push back against their outcomes. Since my own work focuses mostly on surveillance, I'm going to devote my limited time to that. When we think about the interplay between automated technologies and the surveillance society, what are the kinds of harms to core values that we should be most worried about? Let me mention just a few. When we program our surveillance systems to identify suspicious behaviors, what will be our metrics for suspicious? These are the 8 signs of terrorism. I found this brochure in a rest area in upstate New York. Upstate New York, which surely has hordes of terrorists roaming around. My favorite, I think, is number 7, putting people into position and moving them around without actually committing a terrorist act. How smart can our cameras be if the humans programming them are this dumb? And of course, this means that many people, particularly the usual suspects, are going to be logged into systems that will in turn subject them to additional coercive state interventions. But we shouldn't just be worried about false positives. If we worry only about how error-prone these systems are, then more accurate surveillance systems will be seen as the solution to that problem. And I'm at least as worried about a world in which all of my public movements are tracked, stored, and analyzed accurately. Bruce Schneier, who is here, likes to say, think about how you feel when a police car is driving right alongside you. Then think about having that feeling at all hours of every day. Another danger, in our eagerness to make the world quantifiable, we may find ourselves offering the wrong answers to the wrong questions. The wrong answers because extremely remote events like terrorism don't track accurately into hard categories like these. And the wrong question because it doesn't even matter what color we choose on this chart. Once we've adopted this framework, we say that terrorism is an issue of paramount national importance, even though that is a highly questionable proposition. The question becomes, how alarmed should we be? Not, should we be alarmed at all? And once we're stuck in this framework, the only remaining question will be how accurate and effective our surveillance machinery is, not whether we should be constructing and deploying it in the first place. One final observation about the interplay between rights and liberties and technological progress. If we're serious about protecting liberty, equality, and fairness, we have to recognize that in some contexts, inefficiencies can be a feature, not a bug. Look at these words written over 200 years ago. This is an anti-efficiency manifesto. It was created to add friction to the exercise of state power. Fourth Amendment. They can't search or seize without a warrant supported by probable cause of wrongdoing. The Fifth Amendment. The government can't force people to be witnesses against themselves. They don't get 2 bites at the apple. They can't take our freedom or our property without due process. Sixth Amendment. Everyone gets a lawyer and a public trial by jury to confront evidence against them. Eighth Amendment. They can't beat evidence out of us. This document reflects a very deep mistrust of aggregated power. And if we want to preserve our fundamental liberties in a world of aggregated computing power, I would suggest that mistrust should be one of our touchstones. Thank you.